This morning we are beginning a new sermon series, and as I told you earlier in the year, we're going to spend a lot of time this year on Paul and certain letters that he has wrote. And we studied Philippians early on in the year, and today we are beginning Colossians. Now, Colossians is a very important letter. It's not considered the greatest letter by any means. It's considered one of the least important letters if you line it up with the other ones, but Colossians has some very important things to say to us that no other letter of Paul says. And I was planning on beginning this week with an introduction of Colossians, but because of the recent events, I've decided to change that, and we're just going to dive right into it. In fact, we're going to dive into the very last chapter of Colossians. Colossians has 4 chapters, and what I'm going to encourage you to do is that throughout this week that you would just read the book of Colossians. I can sit down and I can read it in about 5 minutes, and that's what I want you to do sometime this week, is just sit down and read the book of Colossians. And then starting next week, we'll have our GPS ready to go, and we will have daily scripture readings found in the book of Colossians that will help us understand it more fully. Well, we find that there are 3 main things that I want us to understand from this passage this morning. I want to read it again for you. It comes from chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. And I would invite you, if you can find some room on your bulletin or on a piece of paper, to write some of the things down that might stick out to you, because I think there's going to be a lot of things that we can use today to help us be better Christians. But the first thing I want us to try to understand from this passage is this. We, as Christians, need to pray for opportunities to arise in our lives to be able to share Christ. In your prayer time, how often do you pray to God for opportunities to arise in your life so that you can share Christ? How often does that happen? I can tell you in my own personal life, in my own personal prayer life, it happens very, very little. And that's a very, very bad thing. So I know if it's happening in my life, I know it's happening in your all's life, and that is something that we need to get good at. And I want to share with you a passage from John, in which Jesus is getting ready to raise Lazarus from the dead. Remember, he was very good friends with Lazarus, and he had died, and he went to the tomb. He came late. Everybody was mad at him because they wanted him to come as soon as he died to revive him from the grave. But he came late. He showed up 4 days late, and people were mad at him. People were upset with him. But I want to read you this story. It comes from verses 38 through 45. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Now notice this. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the whole benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. So here, Jesus is saying and praying, God, there's an opportunity here. Use this opportunity to make your name known, so that they will believe in you. And this is what happens. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now this is what happens when we ask for opportunities. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. That was the purpose of him raising Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus was probably going to go to heaven. Why would Jesus rise him from the dead? He was in a much better place. But he rose him from the dead so that other people would believe. He took a hold of an opportunity that he had to glorify God. And I want to know, how often do we pray for opportunities? Now, when we start to really think about it, this is not an easy thing to pray. Because the thing is that a lot of times when you have opportunities to share Christ is when you yourself are suffering. One of the greatest testaments you can show to other people about your faith is showing that you have faith in the midst of a whole lot of bad things going on in your life. Whether it be through death, whether it be through sickness, whatever the problem might be, you can show God very well in how you handle the problem. But that's not just that. Every day we have opportunities to share Christ. And we need to ask and be praying for those. The second thing we need to learn from this passage is that we need to take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. Now, get this. A normal human being on the face of the planet, a normal person talks to, so that means they meet 15 to 18,000 people in their lives. So if you're out here and you're like 80 or so, chances are you've met 15 to 18,000 people in your life. You've talked to 15 to 18,000 people. When I see that, when I saw that, that's 15 to 18,000 opportunities that God's given you to share Christ. How often do we take advantage of it? How often do you take advantage of it? See, the thing is that we have to get very good at personal evangelism. Evangelism is the act of calling people to Christ. So if you've heard of evangelical Christians, like we are considered mid-evangelical Christians as Methodists, and that's what that means is that we call people to repentance. There's certain sections of the Christian faith that are non-evangelical, like Catholicism and Orthodox. But we are evangelical in that we call people to the faith. But the thing is that we so often think that's a preacher's job, when that's not the case whatsoever. It's each and every Christian's job to be evangelical. And there's many different ways, but I want to give you one very good practical way to get good at personal evangelism. And it's this. There's a threefold method to being able to share Christ. The first part of it is you make a friend. So people that you meet, people in your family, people that you just meet on the side of the road, people at work, whatever, however you meet people, you make friends with them. So you strive to be kind, you strive to be good to them. And the second thing is once you're friends with those people, you have to be a friend. So that means when they're struggling, whenever something's going wrong in their life, whatever it might be, that you are a friend to them. So you make a friend, and then you be a friend, and once you've been a friend, people trust you. People listen to what you have to say. People believe what you have to say. So after those two steps are finished, you then bring that friend to Christ. And this is so important, and it's such an easy way to do things, because whenever you help people, they listen to you. Whenever you're helping them go through certain struggles, whenever you're helping them in their lives, they are going to listen to what you have to say. And you have to make the best of that opportunity when it presents itself to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. The third thing we need to learn from this passage is that we do not need to be afraid to take our conversations to the spiritual level. So often, when we are talking with other people, how often do you have conversations with people? Dozens of times a week. If not in person, over the phone. We are constantly talking to other people. How often do those conversations get taken to the spiritual level? Especially in places that it's not very politically correct to talk about spiritual things, such as in the workplace and things like that. How often do you take your conversations to those spiritual levels? Here's a good example. This week, on every major newspaper in the world, every minor newspaper in the world, every news channel in the world, this past week has talked about one person. Every single headline of the New York Times for this past week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the weekend edition, headlined about one person. Nothing else. It wasn't focused on Japan. It wasn't focused on nuclear meltdown. It wasn't focused on storms in the southeast. It was focused on one person. Osama bin Laden. Right? I could tell you right now, if I had a piece of paper up here, I could draw for you what his compound looked like because I've seen it so many times. And as I started to think about that, and I was thinking about this sermon, as all this talk I was in Virginia on a mission trip this week. I had no television to watch. I had no internet to go to. But still, it was a constant conversation. I talked about it every day. And I started thinking about bin Laden, and I started comparing him to Jesus. And the thing is, they had a lot in common. First, they were both Middle Eastern. Right? Jesus probably looked a whole lot more like Osama bin Laden than he looks like us. They were both Middle Eastern. They were both religious leaders. They both had religious followers. They both taught the religion that they believed in, the truth that they believed in. They were both radicals. It's very clear to see that Osama bin Laden was radical, but Jesus was just as much a radical. He was such a radical that the people of his own faith had him put to death. Now we didn't see Osama bin Laden isn't even that radical. That the Islam community was not crying out for his death. But they were for Jesus. Another thing they have in common is that their death has the opportunity to bring peace. Osama bin Laden's death has the opportunity to bring peace. Jesus' death brings peace. But now here's the thing that's separate from them. Here's the thing that they don't have in common. Chances are you talked more about bin Laden this week than you talked about Jesus. Chances are you celebrated, thousands of people celebrated the death of bin Laden this week. On Sunday night, whenever it was announced that he had died, hundreds of people were around D.C. Hundreds of people were in Times Square. Hundreds of people was at Ground Zero. Hundreds of people were in Pennsylvania. Thousands celebrated his death. Chances are you felt good about it. Chances are when you heard it, you were like, yay, that's way to go. Way to go, America. But there's also a good chance that you did not celebrate the death of Christ this week. We have to take our conversations to the spiritual level. There were so many opportunities this week to do that. How did you take advantage? So 3 things we need to learn from this. We need to pray for opportunities to present themselves so that we can share Christ. We need to take advantage of the opportunities that do present themselves. And in our conversations, our daily conversations, our simple conversations, we do not need to be afraid to take them to spiritual levels. Now, in closing this week, I want to focus on the past 2 weeks. The past week has been rough for thousands of people. Over 350 people have lost their lives. Chances are every single one of us in here knows someone that lives in an area that was devastated. Chances are, if you take it to the second degree, every one of us knows someone that died because of the tornado. Our district superintendent, David Graves, a tornado went through. He used to live in Chattanooga a couple of years ago, pastored a church down there, and a tornado was less than 50 yards away from his old house, and it devastated like 24 houses. Every single one of us knows someone that's been affected by this. So often, we live in a very blessed part of the country. We see very little natural disasters here in East Tennessee. So often when we see natural disasters, they're far off. Right? We saw Japan. We saw the thousands of people that died in Japan. We saw the nuclear meltdown, whatever you want to call it, the nuclear scare that's going on over there. That's far off. We see in Sudan, we see in Africa, 30,000 children dying a day because of malnourishment. That's far off. That's separated from us. We have to try to feel sorry for those people. When we saw Katrina years ago, we still had to try to feel sorry for those people because it was so far removed. You didn't really feel it unless you were there. When there's hurricanes, it's far off. Chances are there's a lot of us, when hurricanes hit, we don't know people that were affected. But this has been different. This has been unique. These storms have affected our own backyards. These storms have affected so many people that we know. On the way up, every time I went up to Virginia and come back, it was nighttime, so I couldn't see going to Pulaski off the interstate. But apparently you talked to some other people that went up through there. When you passed by Glade Springs, you looked on both sides of the interstate and you saw complete destruction. You saw dozens of tractor trailers that had just been picked up and thrown onto one another. 400 homes were devastated in Glade Springs alone. I don't even want to begin to talk about south of us. How bad it is in Alabama, how bad it is in southern Tennessee, how bad it is in parts of Mississippi. There's so much that needs to be done. Billions and billions of dollars in damage. And the thing is when we live in areas where we don't see many natural disasters, people don't buy home insurance. And there are thousands of people that have had their homes destroyed that have zero insurance. There are thousands of people that are going to be living in FEMA trailers because they have nowhere else to go. And these people are in our own backyard. We, as Mount Carmel United Methodist Church, are going to act. This church is so great at doing so many things. We built a church in Sudan, or we're going to build a church in Sudan. We took numerous mission trips to Katrina relief. We did so many things to help out so many people. Every year we do so many things to help out so many people. But this devastation has hit us personally. And so for this year, for the rest of 2011, I want to make it a priority of our mission team, a priority of this church, that we help in whatever ways that we can with this disaster. We're going to be taking multiple mission trips. Floyd can assure me 2 or 3 this summer that we can take. And I'll invite you that if you're a working person to consider taking your vacation time to go help somebody. I want to consider that these are close enough to, many of these are less than a couple of hours drive away. That if you are not able to work, that you consider cooking meals for teams that will be somewhere. That you consider doing whatever you can. There is a way for every single one of us to participate in helping our neighbors. And we need to act. God has given us an opportunity. Whether we've asked for it or not, here it is. And it's important that we take advantage of it. It's important that while this devastation, this suffering, this pain is in our midst, that God shines through. And He can shine through us. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be getting more information out about those things. But today we are going to take up a special offering. And this will go to our own Holston Conference, because there have been thousands of homes destroyed just within our conference. And this will help a little bit to help start providing relief to where it's needed. So I'm going to ask that the ushers come forward.